Hey, it worked. It worked. Finally, it worked. All right, we're back on. All right, so welcome back to Grit Gym. Today we're talking, we wanted to talk about this last week, and we're going to get to it this week. But this is about microloading and how that can affect and how you can use it. And my original, I don't know, you can tell me your original story about how you came by microloading, but mine was this, these old guys at the church that I grew up in told me about. They didn't tell me about the story of Milo. I found out this was the story of Milo later. But basically, Milo would pick up a calf and he'd carry it for a certain amount of distance every day. And a calf's rate of gain is around 3 pounds a day. So that calf was just getting a little bit bigger every day. So Milo was this Greek wrestler back in the day, and he was known for being just big and stout and strong and super successful. I think anyway. So he'd pick this calf up and he'd walk, and he'd do that the next day and the next day and the next day. So 3 pounds turned into 6 pounds, turned into 9 pounds, turned into 12 pounds. So what is that? That's 3 times 7, 21 pounds in a week, approximately, depending on the calf. And the day that he could no longer pick that calf up and walk with that calf, he would start over with another calf that was smaller, much, much smaller. So that would suffice the coaxing the gain, the deload, the recovery, the overload. That's basically how this works. That's what we're trying to get to. So anyway, that's the story of Milo, and that's an example of microloading. How'd you come to my way of microloading? How'd you learn about it?
I think I think that's kind of just how we did strength training in high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, yeah, talking well, let's see. How are we defining microloading as just small increases, incremental increases in weight over time?
I suppose, the longer the older your training age is, the smaller the microload would be.
Sure, yeah. So, the smaller it'd be, or the more spread out in time it'd be.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So yeah, so microloading is a form of progressive overload. So and progressive overload being essential to any strength training program, we need to change some variable to increase each time in order to keep getting a good adaptation to the stimulus, right?
Yeah.
So
if you don't change a variable, well, you mean like over time?
And so over time, so this is just one way. So microloading being changing the variable of weight. Mm-hmm. Over time. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of how we just did it in high school. So it's kind of been
that's not how I did it. High school was when I thought there was not as much, the internet was not a thing like it is now. Like for me, when I was in high school, you could, to download a strength and conditioning PDF, which I would try to do, like a 4-page PDF file might take 4 hours.
Okay.
I might be exaggerating, but it was you had to multitask. Like you would go and you'd get your thing, you'd try. Oh, I can't wait to read this article, and you go do the laundry and come back.
Yeah.
And your daddy's screaming, "Get off the fucking internet!" And you'd be like, "I just want to read this article."
The internet cut off your landline too, so you couldn't.
Right. Yeah, because he'd need the phone, or he'd find out that you're on it. Yeah, it made the hissing noise. You go to log on, and it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole house knew what's going on. So it wasn't like today where it's like YouTube videos galore and just tons of information.
Right.
Like these are the glory days of strength and conditioning because of the sharing. But
I think I was just totally fortunate. For those of you watching who don't know, I went to City High, and so all our strength coaches at the time were either. I think several of them had played football at Iowa. One of them was a wrestler at Iowa.
That'd be cool.
Back in the day. So they kind of knew their stuff to a certain degree. I think they were ahead of most other schools at the time for sure. And so we we had our own sheets to keep track of, which is a key point in any lifting program, but especially if you're trying to microload, you need to be able to look back and see, because it's really easy to forget, right? You got to keep track of all your variables.
Yeah, if you're just going week to week without any, what did I do last week? Then you're just guessing on what you think you...
Right.
You don't remember. I mean, people think that their memories are so great. No way.
And I think even at the time they had it set up so we'd find our 1 rep max, and it would kind of project out our numbers.
Did they?
That's cool. on the main movements, and then the rest of the lifts.
That's how it should be done. I mean, to a certain extent, you need some kind of guidance,
right?
Especially when you're that age.
Yeah.
No, the way that The way that I know, like if you look at like Dave Tate or Jim Windler or Louis Simmons, the way that they do microloading is they do like they go clear down to like 1 pound
1 pound increment.
over. Yeah, like they're just putting like little magnets on the side of their.
Yep.
Just to try to get that little edge, so that they can do that over time. I've seen people do it that way, but I don't know. Like, I think it goes back to the same principle of that progressive overload.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way I do it, I guess I always look for the next 5 pound jump, and it just kind of comes down to how many weeks I can get that. So for instance, when you're starting out,
that's what I was wanting to ask you about too. That's the question. So I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you about that later. But
about
like how you do your 5 pounds.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. So
because that's a microload, like.
Yeah, right, yeah, 5 pounds up. That's the kind of the standard micro load. It's the lowest amount of weight you can add to a bar in a gym, in your standard gym.
So a 2.5 on each side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like at home, I had bought a set of those Olympic fractional loading plates.
Oh, really?
I have a,
nice.
I think it's 1/2 pound plates is my smallest, and then there's like 4 of them in a set, so you can get anywhere between 1/2 pound and like 1 1/4 pounds.
Yeah.
Or actually, it's 0.25 pounds. It's 1/4 pound is the smallest plate, and then you can. Anyway, so and like I bought those, and for a while I use them more on dumbbells than anything because if you're trying to go up 5 pounds on a dumbbell, you want to put 1 1/4 on each side of that, and you have like here we got the magnets, which are amazing.
Plate mate sounds dirty, but it's not. It's just a magnet. It's a 1 1/4 pound. So you put 2 on each, and it gives you an extra weight. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you extra 2.5 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you were going between, like if you needed a 17.5 instead of a 15 for something, well, usually you'd have to go from a 15 to a 20. So it gives you that midway point.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of people kind of need that bridge.
And you could even get more specific. I mean, like when it's that small of a load, you can even put 1 magnet on each side.
Yeah.
And still be, you're not going to really feel a difference for the most part.
But your body is still going to get the stimulus.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I guess today it kind of seems like so, like why wouldn't, like it seems so obvious about like 5 pound jumps, right? But
there's things that are so obvious to us now that it's like.
Yeah. Like, I think I probably take a lot of that stuff for granted because like I said, like I started like that as well as I can remember.
When Rach and I were at this last conference, so it was me and then another guy who's super educated in string conditioning. We were talking to all these other people they were not string conditioning people. And he's talking about like end range stability and specifics around mobility. And he's like, you take your mobility to your end range stability and then you're doing this, and everybody is just totally glazed over. And I'm like, dude, they have no clue what you're talking about. And he was just like, what do you mean they have no clue? And even in that talk yesterday that we had on here, which was really good, I think you'd find it super interesting. That guy just throwing out science babble. I'm like, this is fucking awesome. But I'm like, it's just kind of funny. Even this morning I was sitting there thinking, I was like, I spent the first 16 years of school trying to learn all this stuff and trying to be able to speak the speak and be able to know what all these words mean.
Yep.
And I'm probably like the next 16 years. Which I'm not 16 years out yet, but I'm probably going to spend trying to go back to being able to just speak normal speak.
To dumb it down and explain it how people can understand and simplify it as well. Yeah, totally. I think that's like a big characteristic of all great coaches. They're kind of able to
make
do
things
that.
simple.
Yeah, I mean, same. I'm always trying to find ways to make the complex simple. That's kind of a skill in itself. Yeah,
like when you first started, like you were just coming out, like you're just like you still like coming out of college. I think it's almost impossible not to use those big.
Yeah,
words.
you'll just you'll say like something
bam.
like adduction, abduction, just in a sentence, and then you don't realize that like not everyone knows what that is because you're just surrounded with people who do for the last 4 years or whatever.
And they don't have. I remember my first job out of college. This girl goes, "People don't even know what a scapula is, Adam." And I was like, who doesn't know what a scapula is? It's like, it's your shoulder blade. Just say it's your shoulder blade. And I was like, you're right. But it's just getting down to the basics of that. But it's almost impossible not to. So when you first start, that was one of the funniest things. Like I remember my dad saying that when he came out here for a workout, and he was like, we like Eric. He uses the big words.
That's funny.
Yeah, I know. I got a kick out of that one, But when it comes to microloading and the progressive overload, I think like when you're first starting, you're basically doing these like these 5 and maybe 5 to 25. I mean, 25 is a big jump, but 5 to 15 pound jumps.
Yeah,
You know,
per week or so. Even
Yeah,
when you're
or
first
even per
starting.
month.
Right.
And I think like the older you get, the more you have to manage stress. So you have to kind of do your first 3 weeks are a much lower weight than you know that you could hit, and then your 4th week you try to amp it up a little bit more. And you could do it that way. So you could do like 12, try to break the record 12 times throughout the year instead of just doing it week to week. You know, high school kids, screw it, just
Yeah.
have them break it. you
Right.
know. But it's a little different for everybody else.
Yeah, I'm still kind of. I mean, there's so many ways to to change it up, but like for my training, like the 5-pound jumps I'm kind of looking for. It's always the next thing I'm looking for within a cycle.
Are you calling
On all my main movements.
Are you
on
calling
my
a cycle
compound.
a 4 week? Or are you calling
I guess. Well,
how much time?
I guess both within a 4 week. So right now, let's say, I guess lately for this context, I'll say 3 weeks of more intense working, and then 1 week a low stress week.
Okay.
So and our clients will be familiar with that too, right? Because
Yeah.
that's like the template we use.
That's how we use
and,
it. Yeah.
So for example, like I'll be like for a squat, I'm trying to get to that next 5-pound jump as fast as possible, while still keeping the technique to the level where it should be. And so there's a lot of ways to play around with that, but I think like so for example, I could try to go assuming my reps are the same, I could try going up a 5-pound jump every week, say on sets of 5. And if I can no longer do that, I'll maybe push my 5s to every other week, and then I'll do something else that middle week. And so now I can do, now I'm going up 10 pounds a month instead of 15. But because there's 3 weeks where you're kind of building up, and then 1 week where you're low stress. And then I can run that for another however long before I can't do that, and then I'll push it out to every 3rd week. I'll go up 5, and then kind of the way I've been doing it lately. If I can't get 5 pounds up on my working sets on my main compound lifts, then I think then I'll change. That's when I'll change my exercise selection.
Oh, really?
So
you'll go clear back to that.
Yep. And
Okay.
so like and it's been working really well. Like for example, in the last 8 weeks, I put on 30 pounds to my squat, set of 5.
That's
my top
super
set
impressive.
ever.
That's super impressive.
At
for someone
this
that's
point,
been
it's
lifting as
right.
long as you
And
have.
so, well, it either means I was doing something wrong before, or I just no. But I think my programming is always getting better, and I've just kind of implemented a lot of new tricks, as well as just got like my recovery super on point, which all ties into it. But
that's a good point too. I mean, you, like in the last 2 years, like you started a new job, you switched to mornings. Like there's lifestyle changes that you have to consider.
Yeah. And but yeah. So I think so. At the end of that, so I basically ran for like 4 months there. I was going up 5 pounds a week and just keeping it sets of 5, because why would I change it if I was getting 5 pounds up? And that's assuming like I kind of keeping track. And this is another thing with microloading. I guess another good way, if you're trying to go up each week, another kind of little strategy that I like to implement is keeping track of your RPE, or rate of perceived insertion.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or like now I've been hearing it called RIR, reps in reserve. Have you heard
Oh,
that?
really?
So I think that makes
I
way
haven't
more
heard that,
sense.
no.
So just to go off on a tangent here about this, but so
like that, though.
RPE is a scale where it was originally made for endurance work, I believe, and then they took it to apply it to lifting, and it's a scale that's 1 through 10, but you'll only ever use a number 5 through 10 pretty much, and it doesn't really make much sense, because the number that you give, say it's an RPE 9, you would take 10 and minus that, and you have 1 rep left. Whereas now they kind of actually made a more sensible scale, and it's called reps in reserve, and it's just, instead of saying what's the RPE, what's the reps in reserve, and you just say 1, 2, 3, 4, etc.
Yeah.
which kind of makes way.
Oh, okay, so they
you
took
know
out the 10.
It's no 10. Yeah, it's just
Okay.
reps. How many reps did you have left? Is basically all it is. So you don't have
like
to do
that a lot
10
better.
minus some number. Like why would? Like it just makes sense. Why
Yeah, that
But-
makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So anyway, I think we touched on this video before, but like, so generally you want your end working, your highest working set. Say you're squatting on sets of 5, for example. You want that whatever your top set is, and it might not be your last set, but whatever your top heaviest set is, you should end somewhere. Good to be within the 1 to 2 reps in reserve
Yeah.
place, right? Like that's
Yeah.
kind of where you want to live on that top set. Maybe the set before that is.
On which week are we talking? Are we talking week 4, week 3, week 2?
Well, for
week
this,
1?
I'm just applying it to every week because
Yeah.
as far as you can, say.
I think if you don't end with 2 reps left in the tank, you probably are not doing yourself any favors.
Right,
Like,
and
it's
so
you're probably better off just finishing with 2 reps left in the tank.
right, and just to go into that too, like the reason for that, the stress that you accumulate on a set when you're in each progressive rep is exponential, whereas the adaptation that it's gonna create is linear. So like you're only gonna so if you go till failure on sets, and especially multi-joint compound movements where you're using like substantial amounts over your body weight, you're going to accumulate all this stress, and it'll work, but you have to take low stress weeks way more often,
and it'll only work for a finite period of time.
Yeah, and you won't get enough volume within that time, because if you're taking a low stress week every 3rd week, like you're not lifting a third of the year, essentially, and so like
Which
it
could work
doesn't
for you,
end up
but
in the long run. It's just not sustainable.
It might work for a high school kid.
Yeah,
because their recovery is just like
because their recovery is so good.
It's insane, but it's probably not going to work for anybody else, even if they are on drugs.
Yeah, I mean, it just it comes at the core of it. It just comes back to recovery.
Yeah,
and if you can out recover.
There's still, I almost guarantee you, if we search for it, you can find some Division I strength coach that is still doing reps to failure. But the guy at Minnesota before the new guy came in, the guy that wrote Triphrasic Training. Anyway, when what's his name? Cal Dietz. When Cal Dietz came in, there was like, I forget what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was 4 guys, like 3 or 4 guys that were doing cleans above 300. And 1 year later, there was like 30 guys doing cleans above 300. And so the athletic population did not change, only the programming changed. The guy before Cal Dietz was a big sets to failure, reps to failure.
Yeah.
Cal Dietz thinks that reps to failure and sets to failure are garbage.
Now
he's like a different mind though. That guy's super smart.
Well, and now it's like undebatable. It seems like in the research that volume is the biggest determinant of muscle gain, like total volume.
Yeah.
So if you take one set to failure, it's not like if you're doing 200 pounds at 20 reps, or just do 2 sets of 10 at 20, or at the same weight, 2 sets of 10. So either way, you got 20 reps, but one was to failure and one wasn't. Like that's going to be pretty similar hypertrophy gains in the within the muscle fiber. Like that set to 20, you might get more. You might add some more mitochondria to the cell, or add more capillaries, which will make the muscle bigger physically, but it won't. It's not increasing the number of contractile units.
Yeah.
So
it's not going to make.
So
you
for
stronger.
bodybuilding, that has some more. It'll be physically bigger, but it's not going to lead to any increased performance.
Right.
And so we know now it's we know volume. The amount of volume is the key, and.
And just for them real quick, what are we defining as volume?
Yeah, volume. So the total amount of tonnage that you moved on a certain movement pattern in a lift. For squats, for example, the amount of volume. So the way you can calculate it is sets times reps times weight.
Yeah, so if you were doing 4 sets of 5, you're up to 20 at 200 pounds. You're what would that be? 20 times 200, 4,000.
Wait, 20.
Did I do that right? 20 times 200.
I think so. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying. You
right.
multiply them up.
Yeah. And so I don't even remember what were we talking about before that.
Volume.
So why would you take reps till failure if you're a performance athlete if you can just cut it short, right? Because when you go to failure, that's exponential stress for a linear gain. When you could just cut that 2 reps short and then do a whole nother set, have less total stress and accumulated actually more volume.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like, and that's part of like, I think that's understanding that in the last several years has really helped my training. Because like, I think at some point everyone tries sets till failure, and it's like one of those things, it's like, unless you understand the whole thing about volume and stuff, it's like, you don't really know what kind of effect it's having or if it's good or bad. But I mean, it's not really, like, it's one thing taking a tricep extension to failure at the end of your workout when you're using a really small load, but we're talking like squats where you're, 1.5 to 2 times your body weight till failure is really not
anything that's method. Like super that where technique is a big factor. Like a tricep extension does not take a lot of technique. A squat, tons of technique. Bench press, tons of technique. Deadlift, tons of technique. You could even say that like a bent over row, tons of technique. But curl or a tricep extension is not super technical. So like you can afford to kind of play with those single joint things a little bit more than you could all these other things that are like. I don't really want to downplay the amount of stress that you have from a tricep extension or a curl, but it's nothing compared to a squat.
Just the amount of surface area muscle involved is so much less, and then the whole thing about like just your nervous system controlling everything at one time. Like the mental side of it is
it's hard to make them comparable, but but like we were saying, for bodybuilders, it makes sense for bodybuilders to do that, to just wear out their body, fatigue the muscle, break it down, and then feed it, right? And try to build that muscle up as far as it can. But like it's for a strength athlete or someone who's trying to prevent injury or someone who's, we can get the aesthetic and the strength with our programming without having to sacrifice either. Like we don't have to, like, if we go for the strength, we're going to get the aesthetic. If we go for the movement quality, we're going to get the strength. But if we go the opposite direction, we're going to get an injury. We're going to wear the body down. You're just going to have that beat up, nasty feeling all the time. I don't know. You got real life. And me personally, I don't consider it worth it. People who run like CrossFit gyms, they apparently think it's worth it. What was it the other day that I heard? I think you were here. They were trying to do 50% of his 1 rep max for 50 repetitions.
Straight,
no rest. In his last 10 reps. Yeah, exactly. It was with a straight bar, conventional deadlift. So the hardest technical, I would argue that it's probably the most technical lift there is, or the easiest one to get injured on anyway. The last 12 reps or whatever. Apparently, I didn't watch this, but apparently his back was just like.
I can imagine. And even if you get that, imagine what that does to the rest of your training for the next 2 weeks while you're recovering from that.
I think that would take me out
that's
6
not even
weeks.
going to even out. If you looked however many weeks ahead, and saw the impact that has negatively on that training, it does not get you farther ahead. You get behind by doing something like that. But.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good point. Is what you're planning for, because with our programming out here, the first 4 phases, which I call I call that a macro cycle. So we have 3 macro cycles per year then, and the first phase is built in order to build upon, or the second phase builds upon what happens in the first phase. So literally, the second macro cycle builds upon what you did in your first macro cycle. So for phase 1. Literally, I'm planning on that having an effect on your phase 8. That's how far out. That's 8 months later that I'm planning out for people at Grit Gym. So you think about this guy's drowning out is 2 weeks, and I'm sitting here oh no, I'm 8 months out. It's that's I just don't see the worth.
Right.
And I don't get it. Yeah. That's
crazy.
Yeah, reps of failure 50%.
So, okay, let's go back and revisit. So we're talking, I think we got a long way away. It's probably hard for anyone to follow where we're going. So pulling this back to what going up, progressive overload, using microload to progressively overload your movements. I think that's like I think that's kind of the big thing that hooks people, being able to see 5-pound jumps every so often, like 1+ times a month at least, is kind of like what makes lifting fun for a lot of people. Like that's totally what hooked me. And so
it gets boring if you don't make progress.
Right. So like if I can't do if I'm at a point where like I can't get 5 pounds up in a month on this lift, then what I'll probably do is, if that's my main movement, my first like lift of that program, then I'm going to push it. Then I'll either choose it's time for probably a whole new macro cycle, and I'm going to like switch I'm going to vary my exercise selection. I might not even use that exercise in that next cycle, or if I do, I'm going to push it back to something later in the workout as an accessory and totally change up the sets and reps.
Okay.
And then when I come back, and then after I run that cycle out, I can come back to this. So even say like in a year, maybe I'm not, like 5 pounds a month would be 60 pounds in a year. Maybe I'm not even getting, in the event that I wasn't even going up 60 pounds a year, I was still, all my lifts that I'm doing within these cycles, I can get 5 pounds. Like now I'm just going back, I'm trying to keep it like, if I can't get 5 pounds a month, I'm going to change that. But like say, for example, so at the end of this last cycle, I was doing front squats, and I got up to like, so I ended on 280, and I could feel like my RPE went from like 8 consistently to 9 consistently, because I was going up 5 each week. And so I'm like, okay, this is gonna be back as an accessory in my next cycle here, and I'm just doing 5 sets of 8, and I'm gonna go up on that 5 pounds a week, but I'm dropping it way down, like way too low for the first month, but then building that up. And now when I go back and say I'm doing 3-4 month cycles a year, when I go back, so in 2 more months, I'll be back to a different cycle. I'll put those back on 5s and pick up right where I left off. And and for that whole month, I bet I'll be able to add 5 pounds a week.
Yeah.
So I put it on pause, but instead of like getting a bunch of different reps and stuff in between, like I could just change my rep scheme and stuff, but why not select a different exercise? Yeah. Because that's the fun part, is getting those jumps. And I think the mental momentum that you get from that is like so powerful. Like being able to see jumps every few weeks on a movement. Yeah, and not get demoralized. And it's like always the heaviest you've ever done. Like that's, and I think if you do it right, it can be like that. You just won't be doing it all year. But like right now, all my lifts that I do is like the heaviest they've ever been. That's what each time. Yeah. Well, you're not even close to your prime yet. You still got still got like 5 years. Like some guys even go beyond that, but I think like that's a really simple way to do it. Instead of getting demoralized and just try to beat your head through the wall, like that's what I did for a long time. That's how I did my hip. That's how basically I got all my injuries. Like, no, I'm not backing down from this. When really I could have just shoved it off and practiced it for a little while. And come back to it. And now that I'm thinking about it, like I don't know how much I realized that we were doing this, but with our programming out here, if you notice, like let's say we have squats in phase 1, and we're going fairly heavy on those squats appropriate for that person. Yep. Well, you notice like the next phase, we actually only do speed squats. Yep. We don't go heavy on that, and then we go back and we change the type of squat that they're doing for week 3. So we'll go heavy, speed, heavy. And then we go heavy, speed, heavy, and then on the last phase, we're actually changing the type of squat they're doing. Yeah. So that they get a different stimulus. Right, yeah. And I think there's so much, like, and varying exercise selection, like we vary out here like every month, and I think that's great. Like general population, one, to keep people interested. Like keep them involved. But also, like, I think a big thing is like the more movements that you have in your repertoire of movement, the easier you can pick up new movements. And I think that's huge too. So like you see our clients who have been here for like a year, when they get a new movement, even like something that they've never done before, they'll pick it up really quick. Yeah. Right. It's because just like it's built on what we did. It was built on it, and just because they've done so many different movement patterns that they're more comfortable with everything. Like, just like someone who moves in tons of different planes and all different angles, like martial artists, gymnasts, dancers. Yeah. They can pick up, like they could come in here and just, perfect all these movements really quick, assuming they've been doing it a long time and they're good, just because they're so familiar with movement in general. And so I think that's like real important for general population.
That's part of the reason I like medicine ball so much, just because you hit every vector. Like it's how you actually move. Like you pick your kid up off the ground, that's just like a hip toss into a wall. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to throw your kid into a wall, but like it's the same pattern. You're going to work all these different, your timing and all these different, like I really like it for that reason. Like you just get a ton of different stimulus. Or the same reason that we go into a lateral lunge instead of just doing lunges all the time. Like working in that frontal plane. Yeah, I'm with you. It's interesting to see people progress, but yeah, if you don't change that, like if we don't spend enough time with those same exercises over and over, like if we don't do a lunge over and over and over for 4 weeks, we're not going to learn that exercise, right? But at some point we're going to lose out on the effect of doing that exercise, so we want to switch it up about
because
every
eventually
4 to 10 weeks.
You're going to desensitize to that, and it won't work as well, and that's so there's a ton of benefits to that, and even
But like changing, the research would indicate anyway that changing the reps doesn't do much. Changing your reps and sets, that your body won't it won't lose effect on that. It'll lose. It's about 4 to 10 weeks is when most people will start to kind of like that desensitize to the change in that stimulus. So that's why we change it all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's it's a lot of information.
Everyone was able to follow that, but
I don't know. Yeah, we kind of like I was talking to someone the other day, and they're like, the technobabble that you spew. I'm like, this is like, what are you talking about? Like where did the technobabble begin? She's like, I don't know. I don't understand any of it. I was like, oh shit. But as far as microloading goes, I think like a really good example is a mom. Or if we would have taken a female and 12 months before she gave birth, we gave her a 40-pound kid, she'd probably say, this kid, and we'd ask her, is this heavy? She'd say yes. Well, at some point after she gives birth, she's going to be bouncing a kid off of her hip that's 40 pounds and not think anything of it. That's just a really easy example of progressive of microloading.
Through microloading, right?
Yeah, through microloading, because that kid's going to get a little bit bigger every day. And since she held that kid from the time it was like tiny to being 40 pounds, she doesn't think anything of it. But before, she would have thought he weighed quite a bit. So that's a really example of microloading. If you wanted to try the Milo thing out, you want to go out and grab a calf and pick it up and walk with it. That'd be interesting. You'd get real strong, I guarantee you. No, the old guys at my church, that was my first strength and conditioning lesson. They told me I was so interested in getting strong, and I think I was just like blabbering on and on about it. And they go, if you really want to get strong, go down and pick up one of your dad's calves and put it on the other side of the fence, crawl over, put it on, and then do it again on the other side of the fence, and do that once a day, every day. And they go, you'll be amazed at how big that calf gets before you can't put it on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
And I was probably like 8 years old. I don't know if I could have. I mean, that would have had to have been a pretty small calf, but but it was a good lesson.
Yeah. No, totally.
Anyway, good old church guys. It was. I would talk about strength probably. I'd talk about I know they give me crap about girls that ask me about girls all the time, but they would just tell me war stories always. I just sit there and listen to war stories like every day before and after church. They were awesome, but they're all gone now. It's starting to go away anyway. But anyway, you ready to shut it down?
Yeah.
All right, cool. It's time. All right, thanks for being here, guys. Really appreciate it. Rach says she learned something. Rach says that she learns something new every time, and that she was following. But, yeah. Anyway, thanks for being here, guys. Let us know in the comment section on how the sound was and how the video was, because this is actually a shot on a different device, and I'm curious how it went. But anyway, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. We will see you. Yeah, because we're not going to be on tomorrow, so we'll see you next week. All right. Have a good weekend, guys. Thanks for being here.